So good morning, everyone, and good evening and good afternoon. Depends where you are on the globe. Um, and welcome for another unacceptable webinar. So before we dive into today's discussion, my name is Offir Gutelzon. I am based in Palo Alto. I'm one of the co-founder of Unacceptable, Saving Israeli Democracy, a group of Israeli expert and world jury really passionate about saving Israeli democracy. And before we start our discussion today, just for those of you who didn't hear, there was a ceasefire announced by President Trump for 10 days in Lebanon. It's unclear yet what was approved, what is not by the Israeli government. Things are still ongoing, but just the latest news from the last hour. We are recording it, the discussion Thursday morning Pacific time. So today, we are going to deep dive to the discussion about from Budapest to Jerusalem. We are joined by Yair Navot, who is an analyst. Adva, can you add it to the spotlight, please? An analyst and a journalist specialized in the Russian and the Eastern European affairs, formerly serving as Moscow correspondent for Kol Israel and Yediot Ahronot, currently based in Europe. He is frequent commentator in the Israeli media on geopolitics issues concerning Russia and the post-Soviet space. And if you don't follow Yair on Twitter, it's about time. Yair, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great to have you. And Yair is based in near Amsterdam. We just spoke recently before, and I understand this is not this is not the first place you moved from Israel to, right? Where were you before?
Well, all over the place. We were, in a few countries in the last 25 years. In Europe, all of them. We have lived in the UK, and then Spain, and then France, and then Moscow for 13 years. And then we moved here to the Netherlands around a bit more than 6 years ago. So 6.5 years ago, we moved here. Yeah.
So over the last past 3 years or even more, we have started many of our sessions with the core belief that only together Israeli expats and world jury, obviously together with Israelis in the liberal democracy camp, we can do something about saving Israeli democracy. And this week we have more reason to be a little bit more optimist. For years we've watched politicians in Israel travel to Budapest to study the Hungarian model, not just from Israel, but from all over the world, including America, which was a blueprint for hollowing out democracy institution, capturing the media, and changing electoral laws to ensure permanent rule. We were told that once a regime like Viktor Orbán entrenches itself, it cannot be defeated, but we have seen that a different way this week. So Yair, let's start by taking 10 minutes to give. So our audience is combined from Israeli expats and Israelis and Jewish Americans and people who really cares deeply about democracy, both here and in Israel. So, and not necessarily everyone is familiar with all the details about what happened in Budapest last week, on Sunday, not even last week. So
Yeah, on
I'll give
Sunday.
you the stage to speak a little bit, give us the background.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me. So what happened in Hungary on Sunday? There were general elections in which Viktor Orbán's party, Fidesz, called Fidesz, which was in power for 16 years, was defeated. Now, not only that it was defeated heavily. Not many people predicted or thought that it's going to happen in such a way, but the results were actually astonishing in terms of how big the defeat was. So out of 199 seats in the Hungarian parliament in Budapest, the opposition main party, TISA, won 136 at the moment. It's almost when all votes are counted, which gives it two-third majority, which is a constitutional majority, which allows the new to become Prime Minister Péter Magyar to initiate a very wide range of reforms in an effort to fix the damages of the Orbán regime. And the reason why it was so important, and the reason why so many people, and I would say also governments around the world, were following what happened in Budapest, was that this model of Orbán became, as you said, like a blueprint of a new democracy, which is not very democratic. So it's a new model of, as Orbán himself defined it, as a illiberal democracy, which is a very unique and strange name, because as far as I know, democracy should be a liberal democracy. But through the years, Orbán was able, very smartly, we have to say, we have to admit, he did it in a very smart way. So he used democratic tools and means to make the state, the country, less democratic. And the belief was that he might stay in power as long as he wants, because the power of the party became so strong, and the system was based mainly on his people, and he was very smart to put his own people in all the places of power. And therefore, I think what happened was in a way, a very good and big surprise, although some people expected or predicted that he will lose. But I don't think that even I didn't believe that the defeat will be so severe. And in that perspective, it was very, very important. First of all, for the Hungarian citizens themselves, because many of them were crying for change, and they needed it. But also in other places, the implications of the elections are very wide. It's not only about Hungary. It's also, for example, has implications on the European Union, the relations with Russia, because Hungary was under Orbán one of the main, I would say, pro-Russian powers within the EU. And they put a lot of obstacles for the European Union while it was trying to deal with, for example, Ukraine and other issues. So change in the regime in Budapest will have bigger and wider positive implications, probably.
Yeah, and we'll get deeper into that later. Maybe you can try and map the similarities of the Hungarian blueprint to what it's looked like happening on the media, both here and in Israel, and the courts and the police, and how does the entrenchment into, or ruining the institution and rebuilding them in the shape of Orbán is mapped to what's happening in Israel and maybe in the US?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's very fascinating to not everyone knows it, but there are a lot of similarities also personal similarities between Orbán and Netanyahu. Both of them were already prime ministers before. So Orbán was the prime minister between 1998 to 2002, the first term. At the time, he was much more liberal than today, more like center-left, And Netanyahu was, of course, in Israel, prime minister, first term between 96 to 99. Now, Netanyahu became again prime minister in 2009, and Orbán became again prime minister in 2010. So it's very interesting the way how it worked for both of them. But the difference is, of course, that Orbán, when he was elected in 2010, he started immediately with a wide range of actions in order to consolidate power. But we'll speak about it separately. And I think that we know already that some Israeli ministers, also the prime minister himself in Israel, they took a lot of encouragement and inspiration from what they saw in Hungary, from everything that Orbán done through the years, the way he was able to consolidate power, the way he was able to control eventually the courts, to change the check and balances, to actually take control. He took control over the media. Of course, not immediately, not within 1 month, not even with 1 year, but he did everything quite fast. Actually, between 2010 and 2014, he did almost everything that he wanted in the first stage of his program, of his plan. And no wonder that in the last few years, I would say in the last 5-6 years, there was actually almost like a train of Israeli ministers and strategists who came to Budapest to try and learn how it was done. And then what we saw was that in Israel, immediately after the new government was elected in Israel, end of 2022, start of 2023, we immediately saw how they were trying to promote that kind of model in Israel. If you remember, it was immediately after the government was sworn in, and Justice Minister Levin gave this speech on the 4th of January 2023 with all his like huge plan to change the courts. So basically, from that perspective, they tried to do everything that the Hungarians did, more or less, because of course the systems are a bit different in the way they built. In Hungary, you have constitution, while in Israel you don't have constitution, for example. The electoral system is a bit different as well, but it doesn't really matter. The most important thing is very basic, is like 3 basic rules, is to control the courts, to appoint all the people that are your people in the most important spots, control the media, okay? So the media, the courts, control the message, which helps you to work on the mass people of people. And these 2 are very, very important. And of course, take care of the electoral system. So this is what Orbán did. He changed the system completely, and he redesigned it in a way which basically benefits only the party in power, Fidesz party. So these were the thing that they did in there, and in Israel they were trying to copy it, but fortunately it didn't really work out as good as they wished for.
And I think that the reaction in Israel was swift. I mean, like very quickly, and probably because there was people who were learning the reaction, or probably we saw what's happening in Hungary, and the Israeli responded much faster. Maybe you can compare the protest movement there and in Israel.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because the fact that Israelis, they had something to compare to. So they saw what happened in Hungary. They saw, by the way, what happened also in Poland. We're not talking about Poland today, but there are a lot of similarities as well between Poland and what happened in Hungary and in Israel. So at least the Israeli public, or the people who, well, if to be more precise, the opposition or the people in Israel who were against all this new change, they looked at Hungary and they understood where things are heading. And the Israeli public, as we remember very well, and at the time I was also from time to time in Israel, so I even took part in some of the protests, and the reaction of the public was amazing. We all remember the huge protests every week in central Tel Aviv and in other cities. So the reaction was, I think, significant, powerful. I don't think it didn't necessarily stop the government from advancing, but I think it did. There was a very big, important effect on the government.
On slowing down, at least.
Right? Yeah, they were not able to do everything that they wanted. But I think that it's important to remember that in Israel, we also have the impact of the situation, the security situation, something which in Hungary, of course, doesn't play any role, but in Israel, immediately when 7th of October happened, so everything's changed, of course, because people were shocked and the country immediately went into a war. So all these things were completely stopped. Everything stopped. And actually, during the war, the Israeli government, the current Israeli government, kept trying to push for some elements of the plan, which was, of course, very problematic. But still, I think that today we are still in Israel in a better place, not exactly in a better place, but the plan of the government, the wider plan, they were not able to promote it the way they wanted. So from that perspective, it's good.
So I would just add some context. I mean, again, so if we think about right now as we speak, there is a lot of motions and bills happening in Israel to try and take over the press and the media and the courts and so on. So they are really pushing into that. But if we compare it to where Orbán was, he was already after all of that. So
yeah, he completed this process.
Yeah. And that's kind of again, I mean, in a way, giving us a better chance to still take over as a liberal democracy. So I want to try and dive deeper into the challenger and now the new Prime Minister, Péter Magyar. That's the right to say it?
With the J, Magyar.
Magyar. Yeah. And so maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about him. Because then we will try to compare it to the opposition leaders in Israel.
Yeah. So actually, his story is quite interesting. Péter Magyar is a 45-year-old lawyer who was until 2 years ago, maybe a bit more, 2.5 years ago, was part of the Fidesz party. So he was part of the ruling party. He was a close ally of Viktor Orbán. He used to work for Viktor Orbán in the Prime Minister office for some time. His wife at the time, between 2020 and 2023, was the Justice Minister of Orbán. So you can see that kind of a power couple. He was very involved in the party. He knew a lot. He wasn't a minister or anything, but he did. He had some different jobs. And then what happened was that in 2024, there was a big scandal in Hungary. There was some kind of pedophile case, which was involved with some senior figures in the party, and they tried to prevent investigation. And some journalists were able to discover more details about it. So to make a long story short, the outcome was that as part of the process to clean up the mess, the president, the Hungarian president at the time, had to resign, and the justice minister, which was Magyar, again, wife at the time, also had to resign. And since that moment, early 2024, Magyar made a decision to leave the ruling party, the Fidesz party, and to run alone. He didn't say it at the time, of course, when everything started, but what he did was he took control on a small party called TISA. It was not an important party, a small party, but it was a party which was registered already, so he didn't have to establish, to open a new party. And he took this, the advantage of this party. He started to, to rebuild it again, and to present himself as an opponent to Orbán. And he was able to do it very successfully with time. So between 2024 and 2025, he started to go all over the country, talking with people, presenting himself as an option, as an electoral opposition to Orbán, talking about the need to fight corruption, talking about the problems in the economy, and slowly but surely, people started to support him. And then in mid-2025, for the first time in the polls, TISA, his party, was able even to be more popular than the Fidesz, the ruling party, which was a significant thing for a country in which the ruling party is so, well, not exactly popular, because in a way they redesigned the system so it will be very hard to win against them. And they
it's popular in a way like any other ruling party, like in Russia, or right?
Well, maybe not like in Russia, but they did a lot of dirty things. They paid voters in rural areas, in the more poorest areas of Hungary. So every time there was an election campaign, so they came and they brought these people food, cigarettes, alcohol. It's not a joke. I mean, it's everything was documented, and they basically bought the voters. So, of course, the thing about Magyar to remember is that as someone who came from Fidesz party, first of all, he's a conservative. He's a right-wing conservative. He is not a liberal. I'm not saying it because, of course, to be a left-wing liberal is bad, but because there was something about the fact that he was a right-wing person, which was very pleasant for the voters. And it made it very hard for Orbán and his system to, to present Magyar as someone problematic ideologically. So, and the second thing, and not least important, is that as someone who came from this system, he knew all the tricks. He knew how the system worked. He knew all the dirty tricks of Orbán. And he understood what needs to be done in order to defeat Orbán. So at the time, it might be sounded at the time like a bit ridiculous, but eventually he, in terms of campaign, of a political campaign, he did a brilliant job. And I think also what people need to understand that because of the electoral system in Hungary, so there are like 199 seats, 106 of them are being elected directly in every constitute,
every district.
Every district, and the system is working in a way that the winner takes it all. So one of the reasons it was very easy for Fidesz in the last 10 years or so, or more, 15 years to win, is that the opposition was very divided. So in every district, the opposition put 2 or 3 candidates, which make it very hard for the opposition to win, because the votes are being split between the opposition candidates. And this is why it made it very easy for the Fidesz candidates always to win. What Magyar did was he went to all the other 3 or 4 main opposition parties, and he told them, listen, I'm not about to negotiate with you. If we want to win, if we want to kick out the Orbán government, you need to tell your voters to vote for the candidate of my party, of TISA. So it means that your party should not put candidates in those districts. Otherwise, Orbán will win. Because one of the things that Orbán did very smartly while redesigning the electoral system was to stop this. Before, there were always 2 rounds of vote in the district. So if there are 2 rounds, it means that the opposition in the second round can rely on the opposition on the opposition candidate. So what Orbán did, he canceled the second round, and he said, and the constitution was, of course, rewritten, and there was only 1 round. If there is only 1 round, so it makes it very, very hard to a divided opposition to present a reliable alternative. So what Magyar did was, again, very smartly, he asked basically the opposition parties, like not to compete, to disappear. And amazingly, most of them agreed because they understood that otherwise it will be very hard to topple Orbán.
And so that's by the way, I mean, like last week we had a discussion with Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, and we talked about sliding out democracies and how basically you can turn democracy into a hollow democracy, not with tanks, but just by changing the laws that will work for you. And what's interesting about what you just described about the districts is it's reminding very much what's happening in the US with gerrymandering, right? Where you're trying to basically make the district work for you. And then again, I mean, in this election, we see again, I mean, we see in California, in other places, people are trying to basically fight that with, I mean, understanding the benefit in that. So we'll see how that would work. But to your point, I mean, like about the opposition, and maybe going back, you said that Magyar is not liberal. How much did he promise to the? But it's on the other side. I don't know much about the demographic, about the opinions, and maybe you can tell more about the young generation. For the young generation, right? I mean, again, the definition of right and left in Hungary is definitely different than right and left in Israel,
Yes.
right? But I mean, they were looking for. There was tons of protest about LGBTQ and about the freedom and so on. So when you're saying that he's illiberal, he's not a liberal, do you mean what do you mean by that? In that sense that you are not. I mean, like, did he promise changing back or roll back the Hungary to be a more democratic, or was it not even talking about that in advance?
Well, first of all, it's important to note that in terms of the support within the younger generation, so Magyar had a huge majority. So I'm not talking necessarily now about the last result themselves itself, because it's very, I don't have all the details, but in the polls, like 2 or 3 days before the elections, we saw that more than 70% of the younger generation under the age of 30 supporting TISA, and 63% of the people under the age of 40 supporting TISA and Magyar, which means that the younger generation in Hungary was like a huge supporter of this of the party. I think because mainly Magyar offered them something which many people thought that already disappeared, and this is hope. So he offered them hope. He offered them a change. I think that it's important to remember and to understand that in the last decade, many people immigrated from Hungary. Young people, people with a lot of capabilities, smart people. So people wanted something else, and they got tired from the corrupted system that Orbán built. And we didn't speak about it, but one of the problems, with also a big problem with the Orbán's way of ruling Hungary was that Hungary became the most corrupted country in the European Union by, if you know, by the rating of Transparent International. And it was known that it was very hard to do business in Hungary if you're not connected to the right people. So in many ways, Hungary started to remind some other countries, like namely Russia, in the way that the corruption has entered every aspect of life. When you go to the doctor, when you go to when you need the public service from different kinds, and not only the corruption is of course bad, the corruption also hurts significantly the economy. So I think that the younger generation supported change, and this is why they supported Magyar, although again, he's not, he's conservatives, okay, but he's not radical. So it depends what we're talking about exactly. In terms of, for example, immigration policy, is actually much closer to Orbán than not. But when it comes to fighting corruption, strengthening back the democratic institutions, Zsoltán Magyar is very keen. This is what he promised he's going to do. And only yesterday, he spoke about the need to rebuild the media in Hungary, the public media, which became a tool of the ruling party, of the government, to spread lies, to control the discussion and the narrative. So those are really, really big things. I think this is why people, even from the LGBT community, and Orbán, we need to say, was very harsh with the different laws, and a lot of he created a lot of problems. And now it seems that Magyar is willing to roll back many of the things that Orbán did. The question is whether we will be able or not to do it. And I think that it's very important, first of all, to be patient, but also to judge Mr. Magyar according to his actions and not necessarily according to what he says, because he is basically saying all the right things. But we all know from different politicians that we need to judge them by what they do, not necessarily by what they say.
Yeah, and again, I mean, like when we learn about fascists or in the history, right? They always promise hope before they're actually taking care of keeping their power. So I mean, practically now there is one party controlling 75%, 2/3, right? 2/3 of the parliament. So again, he could, in theory, right, do whatever he wants.
Exactly.
I mean, to take, and that's why I was asking if he was promising any of the changes that we can judge him on action comparing to what he promised, or he was just putting out statements of hope, like again, so many young people in Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Ben Gvir as someone who is promising them hope, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking in comparison.
No, so I need to. So I need to. I will just clarify. He did speak very in details about what he's going to do. He spoke mainly, and this is another thing important about his campaign. He spoke mainly about internal issues. So because he understood that the Hungarian public is more interested in understanding how he's going to fight corruption, how he's going to improve the economy, which currently the Hungarian economy is in a very bad shape, and people, it comes to the daily life issues, health, education, economy, jobs. This is what people are mainly focused on first and foremost, and he was very smart not to start and speak about Ukraine or Russia. Not that he doesn't have an opinion. Of course he has an opinion. But he understood that in order to be successful and to be able to topple Orbán and to replace him, you need to speak about the important issues for people for their daily lives. And this is what he did.
So I want to take us. The audience sent us almost like 40 questions that I kind of like combined into three themes, and that we are going to try and go over them. But one of the question was, and they're all related to the similarities to Israel. And I mean, so to your point, I mean, just to follow on what you said, many of the candidates in Israel who are like the center said like, well, we only need to deal with 80% of the issues that 80% of the people agree upon, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically eliminating out the occupation, the Jewish terrorism, I mean, many other topics that are two-state solution and so on and so on. But on the other side, when we spoke to Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat last week, I mean, she said like, well, you cannot really win the election if you are basically becoming like a copy of the right wing. I mean, you need to actually be much more cohesive in your opinions, like the opposite. But again, if we look in, I mean, to your point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter Magyar was kind of like taking. Do you think he took a stand of like I'm a better Orban, right?
Mm.
Or did he actually made himself like the opposite of Orban?
Yeah, so it's a good question because I think that there are people who are afraid that while he's saying all the right things, so Magyar is basically, as you said, just a second Orban, younger, looks better, knows how to speak, say the right things, but basically is going to take this leverage and the fact that he has like, again, two-third majorities and a constitutional majority to consolidate again power and become Orban number two. This is like, some people think that it might happen. But I think that the majority of people now are willing to give Magyar a true chance. And personally, again, first of all, as I said, I think that we need to judge him by what he will do, not necessarily only but what he's saying. But according to what the things that he said, and because of the complex relations between Hungary and the European Union, so I think that there is a reason to believe that Magyar is not only talking, he is willing to move forward with the significant, I would say, a campaign to basically fix all the problems that Orban caused. So if we speak about the judiciary, if we speak about the media, if we speak about other problematic actions that Orban took.
The police,
so,
the security, right?
Yeah. All of it. The relation with the European Union is very important because, as we know, because of the way Orban, because of the steps that Orban took, and the way he affected the Hungarian democracy, the European Union decided to freeze a lot of funds, close to 17, 18 billion euros. It's a lot of money for a country like Hungary, and they need it very badly in order to, recover the economy, to reinvest in public services and stuff. And for Magyar, it's very important. And he knows very well that without taking these actions, he wouldn't get the money from the European Union. So there is, I think, a reason to believe that he will try to do it for real.
And so it's important to note that, I mean, like, again, because Hungary is part of the European Union, there is another checks and balances on Hungary, right? That is coming from the European Union. Again, something that in theory, there is no checks and balances on Israel from the perspective of the next government in Israel. And so that let's take a bigger view. I mean, and look about Putin and about let's just call it the I'm trying to think about the word comparison to Tzir Resha. To the excess of the wannabe dictators in the world. One of them is obviously Netanyahu and President Trump and the CPAC organization that is keep visiting. I mean, do we see I mean, we definitely know that both Trump and Putin, and me, I mean, I would say I would know, but you can tell more about that, was supported Orban. And now that he is gone, do you see them interfere with the work of Peter Magyar?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that it was amazing to see during the last, I think, few weeks, or even week or 2 weeks, the way that the Trump administration was publicly supporting Viktor Orbán. Now, this is something that I don't remember from any other administration in the US. The way that J.D. Vance, the vice president, arrived to Budapest and participated in a party event and publicly supported Orban's party. It was amazing. It wasn't only, of course, the Trump administration. We know that many other populist leaders around the world sent a message, a video supporting Orban publicly. One of the participants was, of course, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Other were Marine Le Pen from the National Front in France, the Argentinian president, if I'm not mistaken, also the leader of the Alternative for Germany, which is an extreme right movement. But from the other hand, Putin didn't support Orban publicly, while he did support him in many, many other ways, which helped Orban by putting Secret Service, Russian Secret Service people on the ground in Budapest, by sending political strategists, some of them are very, very famous and experienced, to Hungary in the last month before the elections in order to try and to help Orban's campaign. And in the last days before the elections, some independent Hungarian journalists, they published an investigation which discovered, I would say, how deep the connection between the Kremlin and the Hungarian government were. So the Hungarian foreign minister was recorded speaking with the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, and he basically promised him to provide him with documents from within European Union discussions and to help him with other matters concerning sanctions on family relatives of some very powerful oligarchs in Russia. So this is something, it was amazing because it exposed at the time the way that the Russians, first of all, the way the Russian treats Hungary, and the way the Hungarian government of Viktor Orbán was, doing everything that the Russian asked them for. So the fact that Orban lost for the Kremlin is a big blow. No doubt about it. But in the last few days, the Russians again showing their pragmatic side, because they said we have the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Russia has no problem to work with any new government in Hungary, and they are hoping for a pragmatic relations, and they are willing to start to talk. It was interesting because Magyar himself, in his press conference, I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, to the international press, was very clear. He said, "I'm not going to call President Trump, and I'm not going to call President Putin. I will talk with them if they will call me, of course, but I'm not going to call them." So it was very, the both of them supported his opponent. No, not publicly, but supported him.
So taking back to Israel, one of the big questions is what can we learn, and if there is any comparison, to what's happening in Israel. And one of the key questions is that we know now that the opposition is run by 3 or by 6 leaders, going from all the way right to left. Very, very, but unrelated. But we saw polls today that are keeping the blocks the same, about 70 seats to the opposition parties against Netanyahu and 50 to Netanyahu and the rest. So pretty much similar blocks. I mean, like, do we see? I mean, if you would have to guess out of all the opposition leaders, I mean, who would be able to do something, pull this trick out of, or organize himself around himself? Unfortunately, it's him. There is no hair. Himself, the leadership to win Netanyahu. What is the most similarity you see to Peter Magyar?
Well, I think that, and we also, I mean, it's very visible in the polls in Israel that the most, I think that Naftali Bennett is the leading figure in terms of his ability to win against Netanyahu. But the thing is that in Israel, and we all know it, it's a bit a different system. So although it depends, because Bennett alone won't be able to do it. He needs a coalition. So he needs other parties. So he needs to have an agreement with the other leaders of the other opposition parties. And I think that one of the things that he might consider is running not in one list, because the differences with ideology in terms of ideology there are differences. So, for example, Bennett's list or Bennett's party won't be able to run as together with the Democrats of Yair Golan, for example. But what they can do is to agree between themselves when we know exactly when the elections will take place. So if everyone knows that they run under the umbrella of Bennett as a big list, yes, not as a one party, but as like a coalition of parties, and everyone knows that after the elections, Naftali Bennett will be the candidate of this coalition to the role of prime minister. I think that there is a good chance because the voters will be able to vote for their own party, which they desire to vote for. For example, if it's the new party of the former chief of staff, the general chief of staff Eisenkot, for example, or they can still vote for their own party, but together, all the parties, all the opposition parties will have like enough power to push Bennett and to support his candidacy as to become prime minister. Because I don't see I don't see and correct me if I'm wrong. I find it very hard to see someone else, maybe Eisenkot, but Bennett was already prime minister. We need to remember.
But I would want to try and in a way and rethink about it. I mean, like, so and I'm trying to understand what happened in Hungary. I mean, so out of the 3 or 4 parties that Peter Magyar came and said to them, "Don't run," was there any those parties was more right wing than him, more left wing than him? I mean, and did they actually, or they were just kind of like, again, like in our case in Israel, they are pretty much the same, like Bennett, Eisenkot, Lapid. I mean, like, they are all about the same opinion. I mean, like, because right now it seems like Bennett is able to take a lot of votes from the center left, but not necessarily a lot from the right wing parties. So maybe you can tell us more about who gave up power for Peter Magyar in order to save the country in their perspective.
Yeah, well, we're talking about 3 or 4 parties. So one was more left than Magyar. The other one was like another populist party, and the other 2 were actually smaller. And one of them was actually did decide to put some candidates in some districts because they didn't want to give up at all. It didn't change a lot, but the others decided that they are not going to put candidates in any district, which is when you think about it, it's quite amazing because they basically have no seats in parliament. They have no, but I think that now I heard that Magyar might consider to nominate some of these people from these parties to ministerial roles. So it's in a way to compensate them, and they did a big thing because actually what they did made it possible for him to win. So yes, but in Israel again, the situation is it's I think completely different. Also, the system is a bit different. Also, as we said, the circumstances are different. The war, the ability of the ruling party of the Likud and the prime minister to control the narrative, okay, with all the security situation, very, very complex. The public in Israel is in many ways exhausted, tired. And I don't know exactly how it will affect the outcome of the next elections, but I think that if there is one important lesson to learn from Hungary for Israelis, for Israel, is first of all the importance of the turnout. So in Hungary, the turnout in these elections were almost 80%. It was the highest turnout since 1990, after the fall of communism, and since the first democratic real elections in Hungary took place in 1990. So this Sunday it was the highest turnout ever. So the first important thing to remember is if you want to make a significant political change, you need to make sure the people are voting. So you need to make sure they understand that it's important to vote. Because you also aware of it like me. In Israel, they always have those people who say, no, there is no point to go and vote. The story is finished, no point. And I think this is wrong, especially in our days. It's important to convince people to go and vote. And I know personally people from abroad, here in the Netherlands, in Israel, in other places, and I'm the same. That if I know that there are elections, I will take a plane and I will go and vote because I have the right to do it legally. Of course, so I would do it because I think it's important. So people inside Israel, they have to take advantage and use this opportunity. And I know it sounds like a cliche in many ways, but this is how it works in democracy. You need to use your vote.
Yep, and I would add on that, and this is actually taking me to the kind of like the last question is again, so obviously anyone who has I want to know if you said that many I would say educated people and high professional in Hungary left Hungary, and I'm wondering if you know how much they were involved in helping the opposition in Hungary in voting, which I think you told me that they don't really need to go and fly to Hungary. They just maybe need to take a train or vote in the embassy. But how much they were involved, and then we can close by talking about what can we do from here.
Yeah. So one of the things that Orban did in terms of the Hungarians who lives abroad, so he redesigned the system in a way which will benefit the ruling party. So he redesigned the constitution and the electoral law in a way which allow, for example, the Hungarian diaspora in the countries around Hungary, like Hungarian minorities in the neighboring countries, to vote. How? By mail. So by mail. So, but the thing is that while he allows them to do it, other Hungarians who live, for example, across the European Union are not allowed to vote. So he made it very hard for them. So in order to vote, you need to have an address in a permanent address in Hungary. So what he did was in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, when he rearranged the electoral system, he put a kind of a chapter in the law, which allowed the Hungarian minorities in the countries around Hungary to vote, and they can vote by mail. So they don't need to come to the embassy. They even don't need to come physically to Hungary, they can vote by mail. It's very easy. It's very, but and they now the result of all this thing was that in the election on Sunday, 84% of all those Hungarian minorities abroad, and abroad it's like close to Hungary, it's not all over the European Union, voted for Fidesz, of course, because when he did this move, he also promised them, you know, like budgets and passports.
And who are those minorities? Like sitting in Poland, in Belarus, in like where are they? Like
no, they're sitting in, for example, you have in Ukraine you have a Hungarian minority, in Slovakia, if I'm not mistaken, in Serbia even you have an Hungarian minority, and he knows about it. And the thing is that because of all the other changes that he did, so in the last few years or in the last 2 or 3 elections campaigns, the votes of those people gave him another between 1 to 3 seats in the parliament, and maybe he was the party was, of course, with a bigger majority because of it. So yeah, everything that Orban did, he did in a way which is like better and serving and benefiting the ruling party. And it's not about the citizens, it's not about the public interests, it's not about how to improve, it's about how I consolidate my power and how I can keep myself and my party in power. And this was the basic thing that he worked according to.
Yeah, I got a comment that there is a big, large Hungarian minority in Romania, in Transylvania.
Romania as well, yes, yeah,
right.
Of course.
I mean,
yeah,
which again, it's remind me my grandma that I was just talking about her as a Holocaust survivor, my late grandma who was from there. Okay, so I want to close, and I want to just remind everyone that again, I mean, like, first of all, I hear a lot of people around me in the Jewish community, less than Israeli expats, they don't even know that there are elections in Israel. So October 27, which today we heard that Netanyahu thinks that October 27 sounds too much like October 7.
Doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. So he's trying to move it to October, I don't know, 14, 17. I mean, I don't know, 7 days before.
Maybe October 7th.
Maybe October 20. So it's coming. So again, get organized. If you have an Israeli passport and you had an address before, you should be able to go and vote. And you can actually consult with Aid Coalition. They have a fly and vote program. But also if you're Jewish Americans, I mean, and you don't have the right to vote, we always say that this is the most critical election, not just for Israelis, but for Jewish people around the world. And there are things that you can do through UnXeptable and through other organizations to support grassroots movement in Israel, which are very political but not partisan, thinking about voter turnout, voter intimidation, and safeguarding the election. And we will send more information about that. So Yair, I really want to thank you for taking the time during your evening, and I want to thank Adva from Madrid. And I want to thank all of you who keep coming. And I want to tell you that we are in this week of what I call the Israeli high holidays of Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, and Yom HaAtzmaut, important holidays. And we are going to stream live the alternative torchlight ceremony on Tuesday. And then I'm going to host Moshe Bogi Ya'alon, who the former chief of staff and defense minister, about his fight for Israel on Wednesday. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your support. Keep supporting us. And Yair, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.